I am so excited to have you on this podcast, and I will say it to you again, don't it up.
Can we just stop there? That was a beautiful intro. I love it. Thank you.
Welcome to Badass Softie, a podcast for leaders who are unapologetically ambitious and want to lead with heart because you're allowed to chase big goals without losing what makes you human. I'm your host, Dr. JJ Peterson, and I know that everybody listening to this podcast wants to be a better leader. Like for yourself, you want to be able to lead yourself better. You want to lead your team better. You want to lead your business better. And so often when it comes to leadership, we are thrown books and techniques and systems, ways to just kind of act differently. Those are fantastic and those have worked well for me. So many of them have. And yet on today's podcast, we're going to start thinking about leadership and growth a little bit differently. Maybe it needs to be less about the things you do and more about the questions you ask. And so today on the podcast I'm interviewing one of my very good friends, Amy Smith, who has worked for Apple. She really launched the retail branch of Apple all over the world. She's a consultant who's worked with companies like McDonald. She also was at StoryBrand with me. And today she comes on and gives us some questions that we can ask about ourselves that really open up conversation and possibility to grow in our leadership. So if you've been overwhelmed by books and tips and tricks and systems to grow in your leadership, you're going to love today's conversation because it's about questions and conversations that you can have to grow. Here is my conversation with my dear friend, Amy Smith. Amy Smith, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. I know I'm a little bit teary because we were just laughing too hard ahead of time. And I want to share with our listeners why I wanted you on this podcast. You know, first off, you have an amazing resume of all the way going back to working as a flagship store manager for Apple and a regional trainer, and you've built your own business and you're a consultant and you've worked with huge companies, including even McDonald's. And you worked with me as a facilitator at StoryBrand and then actually became vice president of certification. So you have this unbelievable resume, but resumes alone don't impress me because I know a lot of people who have incredible resumes who I can't stand to be around. And yet, when I first met you, because I was introduced to you through a mutual friend, I knew there was a kinship between us because do you remember the very first thing I told you when you were going to get ready to do the very first workshop for StoryBrand? What was it? What were the words I said to you?
Can I say them?
Yeah. We're not a PG podcast here.
Okay, great. Don't fuck it up.
Yeah. Yes, I did. And I knew I could say that to you because I had watched you interact with people for a couple of years before we really we'd known each other. And I had watched your genius. I had watched your expertise, and you came across with strength, but kindness. And you teach people how to actually lead. So all of those reasons, besides the fact that I just adore you as a human being, I am so excited to have you on this podcast. And I will say it to you again, don't fuck it up.
Can we just stop there? That was a beautiful intro. I love it. Thank you. Yeah.
You are welcome. I mean, it really is unbelievable. But I want to kind of go back because when we first met, one of the things obviously I was intrigued and was kind of the big highlights on your resume is you had been working for Apple and you were running one of the flagship stores. You were also a regional trainer. You went around and helped stores get set up all over the world. And I'm curious, just like that leap for you to kind of go into a big organization like that, what were some of the things that you learned stepping into that role for a huge company that you were very public facing, obviously the store side of things? What are some of the things that you learned in your career at Apple that you carry through to today?
Well, let me start about leadership. I think most importantly is this phrase that we used. I don't know if they still use it there, but I have adapted it and I've heard it throughout my career, but it's this phrase called assume positive intent. So often our natural response is to sort of default to judging. Like we want to be focused on a problem, win-lose solutions. We want to blame. We want to dig in when things don't go our way or unexpected things happen and we get frustrated. We immediately go to what I call this judger mindset. And it doesn't really serve anybody well. You kind of get stuck. And instead going into this learner mindset, which is like, let's focus on solutions. Let's focus on what is possible and what can we do differently. And so the beginnings of that for me came at Apple, where we had this phrase called assume positive intent. So we don't know, like instead of getting frustrated when things don't go well, or, whether it's at a customer or a colleague or a coworker or something that was happening. So that was, I think, one of my biggest lessons, mindsets. And it really shifted how I think as a leader, because now it prepares me to go into a conversation, a situation, not sort of being armored up, that I'm willing to assume positive intent and think about what might be possible.
I think a lot of times in leadership, we are trainers. We think of ourselves sometimes as managers, but as trainers. And I'm just curious, kind of in that role, even at Apple, what were some things that you learned or developed? Because you created a bunch of manuals, all these things. What are some things that you developed, or one thing maybe you developed or learned in the training role from the leadership side? By the way, I know I didn't set you up. I told you we were talking about something different, and now I'm taking this direction. I promise we'll get to what I told you we're talking about, but you are doing really well. You're answering questions.
Adaptability.
But yeah, what did you learn as a trainer in that space?
What I learned is how to lead with clarity when you don't have all the answers, right? Because so often you're in positions, if there's not a place I can go to that goes, oh, here's a step-by-step procedure on how to make this decision, in training. Like I can remember, oh God, so many times we would do training. Let's say we were getting ready to open up our first stores in the UK, and our first store was Regent Street in London. And I just remember, it was like, we were just figuring things out, like how do you get all these laptops over there? We wanted to have laptops in training, or how do we get people who are remote and we're in a hotel doing training? How do we get them access behind the company firewall without giving them too much access or without compromising the company? So we were just having to learn and sort of like figure out as we go, because we had never done this before. We'd never opened up stores. I was part of a team. We did the UK, and then we went into Canada, and then I was part of the team in Italy. And it's like, there wasn't a rule book or a playbook or procedure. So for me, it was like, how do you learn to make decisions and lead with clarity when you don't have all the answers? And I think the people that I worked with at Apple, the leaders that I had, did a really great job. They would communicate very clearly the why, like this is why we're launching the stores here, or this is what we want the training experience to be. And ultimately, we were clear on what the outcome needed to be, but sort of the how we got there, we were empowered to make decisions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a lot of people are in that space, especially if you're an entrepreneur. It's like, I remember when we were starting StoryBrand, people would say to us, we'd be doing a certification with our guide program. And somebody would say to us, are we allowed to go on podcasts and talk about this? And we would all kind of look, we're in the middle of training that people have paid us money for. And we would turn to each other and go, I think so. Oh, wait, you know what? Maybe not. And then we'd kind of have to do it in real time because there were things like we hadn't talked about before that moment, and having to be able to understand and even in the moment, sometimes in front of people, explain why we're making this decision, what it means for the whole community, not just for this individual who's asking this question, right? So, because like same thing, you could give somebody, one person in a hotel room access behind a firewall, but what does that actually do for everybody else in the future of training, all of that. And so I remember that, but that's so important to explain why you're making this decision when it's new and people don't understand, and then being really, really clear about what the steps are in order to actually we say clarity is kindness. And so being kind to people and say, no, these are the boundaries. These are the boxes we're playing in. So let's just be clear about that. Well, the reason I asked you because about Apple in particular is one, people are very familiar with that. I could ask you about your experience with McDonald's. I could ask you your experience with so many huge companies, including StoryBrand. But I know what you've done now is you've taken kind of all of those lessons that you've learned throughout your career, and you are now doing leadership coaching, and you're helping people, not just like founders of companies, you're coaching them, or presidents of companies, but you're also coaching their teams. And you and I were talking the other day, and as we were talking, you just mentioned a single question that I should be thinking about in my own leadership. And I went, Amy, that's genius. And you're like, well, that's what I do. I was like, oh, I'm like, oh yeah, I forget sometimes, this is what you do. And so we really started kind of in that moment talking about some questions that you bring to the leaders that you coach to help them think differently about the way they lead. And I said, would you mind coming on the podcast and sharing like 3 to 5 of those with our listeners so that they can actually have in their brain some questions they need to be asking about their own leadership style. So would you be willing to share some of those questions and talk about kind of the why behind those questions that you ask in your own personal coaching?
100%. I'd love to. And I love that you asked. And I just want to preface this if I can. Yeah, I had a great foundation and such an amazing experience in my time at Apple. And then I think about, there's also the flip side of our time where we got to work together and what I got to learn from you, right? And I think what's been most beneficial, what has sort of empowered me once I've stepped into this new space and that we're going to talk about is it was how to actually start communicating. It's what I learned from you at StoryBrand in the power of story and how to really take some of these ideas and concepts that I got and I internalized, but how do I communicate them in a clear and compelling way that makes people want to pay attention? So I just want to give a little shout out and thank you to you because I think it was very instrumental in what I'm doing now. But yeah, let's talk about some of these questions.
Yeah. So, and I know you have a lot because you going to do ongoing coaching, but I asked you to kind of narrow it down to just a few. So what are some of the important questions that you ask in your coaching of these leaders?
One of my favorite of these guiding questions, it really focuses on the idea of building trust and credibility, because I think as a leader, before you can go lead other people, you got to think about yourself, self-leadership, right? Like, who am I as a leader? How do I want to show up? What does that mean? So the first piece around self-leadership, trust and credibility is paramount. So the question is, when it really matters, do people know they can count on me?
That's a really powerful question. When it really matters, do people know that they can count on me? That I think that brings up, for myself, my first thing, actually, what I was thinking about was my kids. Like when they get in trouble or when things go awry, do they know that they can come to me or are they scared to come to me? Which then translates very quickly into the people that I work with. Same thing, right? Like, not that they're my children, but in the sense that like when things go awry, which they will in business and leadership, do people feel like they can come to me and I can be a problem solver with them and I can support them in this and help them and call them on the carpet on things? Or am I the kind of person that people are afraid to come to when push comes to shove? That's a really powerful question for me to just pause and ask myself in this moment. And let me kind of ask you then, as I'm reflecting for myself, thank you for this coaching and therapy, as we're going through this, if you were to say, like, so you said that a lot of these can be attached to actions. So for me, if I'm sitting here and I go, okay, I want to be the kind of person who people can rely on when push comes to shove, what are some things that I can do now with the people I work with that can help that be true? Like that can, if I'm like kind of you're coaching me, what are some things that then I need to be asking or doing of myself to say, yes, I want that to be true. And I think it's mostly true, but I think there are some times when people might be a little nervous to come to me with something, what are some things that I can do to kind of move myself more in that direction?
Sure. Well, I want to share with you is when it comes to trust, it's actually, there's this really, if I can kind of cite a book or a resource, there's a really great book called The Trusted Advisor. And in it, there's actually an equation for trust. And trust really has a couple of components. It has credibility, it's reliability, it's something called intimacy, and then self-orientation. And so trust is not this mythical sort of intangible thing. It is very concrete. So what are those actions, like things that you can think about? I think when it comes to something like credibility, right? So if credibility is part of trust, do you actually know what you're talking about? Do you actually know your stuff? Or do you have understanding it on, you're not just sort of saying the words out loud and sort of pontificating, but you actually legitimately understand the thing that you're talking about, or being a leader, or asking what you want somebody to be able to do, or what that piece is. I also think on reliability, there's this piece, like, do you follow through on what you say? Do you do the things you say you'll do? And your actions, that is something that is very tangible. It's measurable. People can look and go, yep, like that's a huge part of trust, is the reliability piece. And so looking at, do you do the things you say you'll do? That's easy to measure, right? I can look at that. Intimacy is more around, it's very relational. It's harder to measure, but it's really answering the question, do people feel safe with you, right? Are you approachable? When somebody comes to you, are you going all of a sudden into blame and fault, or are you like getting curious? Are you somebody who stays open? You're curious because you want to understand without moving to judgment.
So good. Yes, that's hugely helpful. And I can see in my own life, in those moments when I have leaned into those things, that people do trust me and they are more willing to come to me in those moments. And when I have fallen short on some of those areas, maybe I haven't followed through, or I've created an unsafe environment, that those are the moments that, again, my kids or the people I work with would also kind of create that, like they would feel like maybe I can't come to him in this. I'm not sure that's a question I've ever asked myself. When things really matter, can people count on me? That's a different way of thinking about leadership. What's another guiding question that you ask of your coaching clients?
Okay. So let me just also, if I may, real quick, mention the thing I also want to say with trust and credibility is you got to give yourself some grace in the fact that trust and credibility are not built in one single gesture, right? It doesn't happen just in one big sweeping moment in time. It's all the little things over time, right? It's like when somebody asks you to do something, or do you respond to an email or to a text? So I just wanted to kind of leave that piece. Trust is built in moments over time, in those small incremental moments. Another question that I will ask people, kind of a guiding question, is here's the guiding question, when the path is murky, how do I make the call that keeps us moving forward?
Explain that a little bit more.
It's interesting because I'm working with a particular client right now, and I'm doing some coaching with their leaders, where this company is going through a lot of change right now. They are getting ready, sort of preparing themselves for looking like a merger and an acquisition. They've also are having to consider potentially doing some layoffs. There's a lot of change that's happening. And these leaders that I'm talking with, they're sort of navigating through this change and this transition. And so the path can feel murky. It's like, well, how do I plan for my business when there's a lot of uncertainty or there's change, and it's also recognizing when I say the path is murky, it's like there's uncertainty. There are things that are out of my control and out of my influence. And I may know that they're going to be happening. I just don't know when. So things feel unsettled. And so how do I continue to operate in the day-to-day? How do I continue to make decisions for the business or for my people? I also have this sort of heaviness of like uncertainty weighing on me.
And what are some things people can do to help what are the actions that people can take in order to help move forward in the murky?
Yeah. Well, I love this. I've been talking with people. It's first of all, I think the first thing you can do is it's called the locus of control. It's like recognizing, there is an internal locus of control and an external locus of control, right? So recognizing first and foremost, what is within my control? Well, we all know, we know, or if you don't, we don't all know, but you'll know now. Things that are always in your control, you always get to choose how you react to a situation. You always have that choice of your attitude, what you're going to do, or what you're going to say, right? And then you can choose, you can choose your actions. Those are always within your control. There are other things that, situation by situation that are also in control, but knowing how you show up, how you choose to react, what you choose to say. Like, honestly, JJ, I'm sure you'll relate to this. A lot of that mindset ties to Viktor Frankl, right? And that thinking of like, we always choose how we show up. So recognizing what's within your control. And then what are the things that are outside of your control, especially when things feel uncertain or murky? There are things that if it's like, I'm uncertain about the market, tariffs for entrepreneurs, or, business or certain client, like there are things that, gosh, I know that they're out there, but they are actually out of my control because I'm not the decision maker. I'm not the person who's going to make that decision. So when you recognize things that are outside of your control, it's easy to say, hard to do. It's about letting them go. You can only focus on the things that you can control or influence.
And I think that's so important for leaders when you're talking about actions they can take, is even helping your team recognize that as well, right? Like bringing it back as I'm applying this to myself, of like, one, understanding that for the way that I think about things. But the other part is, as I'm leading people, to help them lean into the things that they have control over and allowing the things that they don't. It's not ignoring them. It's not sweeping them under a rug, but it's recognizing this is out of my control, but maybe this piece of it is within my control. This is what we're going to focus on. And these are the steps we're going to take to move forward, and be really clear about that. Again, saying and leading your team that way, I think is so powerful, because you're right. Like there is never going to be a time in business or in leadership where you have all the answers, where everything is incredibly clear about where you're headed and everything is in your control. That will not happen. And we always want it to and try to create situations to make it that way. But all of those things are true. And so in those moments when it is murky, how do we approach it? I love this idea of understanding, first off, what is in my control, what's out of my control, and then allowing yourself and your team to lean into those things you have control over to continue to keep moving the ship forward in the midst of the fog. Not in spite of the fog, but really in light of it. We say we move forward this way in the things we have control. This is so cool, so powerful. So those two things are incredible, but just kind of give me very high level, maybe like 3 more questions that you ask.
Okay.
3 more that we can offer people that they can because I could spend weeks just on these first 2 on myself, but give me like 3, just kind of high level, 3 more questions, guiding questions that you ask your coaching clients.
Okay, this next one of my favorites. I see it all. I see the need for this question all the time. So if you are somebody who has a team of people, right? If you're a leader, if you're a people leader, or if you are an entrepreneur and you either work with, you've got people who work for you, or you've got like contractors. It's all about, this is all about thinking about one-on-ones, right? And having these weekly meetings. So here's the question. If my one-on-ones are my most powerful leadership tool, what needs to change? And I ask that question because think about it, like so many people, and it's been my experience, I have watched this in organizations where I've worked. I've watched this as a coach. Like people say one-on-ones are important, but they are the first things that get canceled. because people are like, oh, can we reschedule or can we cancel our meeting this week? And I think if we sort of shifted that perspective and actually said, one-on-ones are my most valuable and most powerful leadership tool that I have. If I met with my direct reports or my contractors weekly, what would change? What would need to change about me? But also think about how that would transform the work that you do or your business. And what I mean by that, and when I say have a one-on-one, it can be a 20 to a 30-minute meeting. It's really aligning with people on what they're working on, how it's going, what's next. And oftentimes, if you were to stay committed to having regular one-on-ones with your team, in the long run, you would have less meetings. You would also have more efficient, more productive meetings. Your team would be more engaged because they would also know they would be able to be more productive and effective in their work because they're not waiting to meet with you, once a month or every 2 weeks. Like, people can move faster when you're meeting with them more frequently, but they're also more engaged because they're getting real-time feedback more frequently. So I think it's a really powerful shift. It's like, if I viewed my one-on-ones as my most powerful tool, then what would need to change for me as a leader?
Yeah. So good. It's such a different way of asking the question about one-on-ones of like what needs to change, right? Versus like, how do I make these more efficient? I think that's often the question is, how do I make these more efficient, or how do I structure them so we can get through them, or how do I have less on my calendar? But to actually ask the question, how do we change? What would we change? I think that's incredibly powerful. Ooh, so good. Okay. Well, what's the next one?
This one's about simplifying, improving your workflow. Like, when I think about work processes and workflows. So are the meetings I touch, so either I'm in or I influence, are they driving results or wasting time?
I like that a lot. Because I think, again, we can get into death by meetings. And a lot of times when we started this meeting, this weekly meeting or monthly meeting, we needed it. And then we keep it going because it was so effective the first 2 months we did it. And then now it's not needed. And so the fact that you can just pause and have the freedom to ask that question about meetings, I think is really powerful. It's kind of like, it seems pretty obvious, but it's a question I think that like I should be asking on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think there's that too, JJ. I think it's like we start with certain meeting cadences and we just keep going along, and we're not actively going, is this meeting still relevant? Is it still driving the results we want as our business might be growing or scaling, adapting? Is this still relevant? And I think, are we wasting time? And, it also goes to asking the question, and a question under that is, it's like, do we have the right people in the meeting? Right? Or are we even having the right kind of meetings? So often, I hear from people, from clients too, they're like, we don't want to have too many meetings. It's like, well, yeah, but also have the right kind of meetings, right? Like, it's not about adding more meetings. If you're very intentional about your meetings and the purpose and who needs to be in the room and why you're having them, you'll be much more productive and effective.
So true. Oh, I love it. Okay. Give me one more. Let's end with one more for our listeners.
Oh my gosh. How about this one? This is around building. And one of the things I love to do is help leaders build a high-performing, high-trust team. So what shifts in my leadership would unlock more trust, ownership, and growth on my team?
Say that again, because I want to internalize that for a second. Say that again for me.
What shifts in my leadership would unlock more trust, ownership, and growth on my team?
What shift in my leadership? That's such a good question, because a lot of times what we're looking at is the person that we're leading and going, man, they need to change. They need to do something different. They need to be stronger, and they need to take more control. They don't need to ask my permission. They just need to take it. Well, what is about that my leadership is created that makes them feel like they can't take control? Or what is the way that I lead that makes people go slow when I want them to go fast, or go fast when I want them to go slow? Like, what is it about the way that I'm leading them, instead of getting frustrated with them? What do I have to change in my leadership that actually unlocks more potential in them as humans, and then also in my business? Because, I think for anybody who works with me, my goal would be that they leave me stronger, with a stronger resume, more skills to go on whatever they do in their life. Like, that would be my goal, is that your time with me built in you and for you, whatever you're going to become next. Like, I will take you as long as I can. It might be for 10 years, but it might be for 10 months, whatever that is. I hope that you learned more here and got better at being a human and better at your job while you were with me. And so instead of me getting frustrated with who they are, or how they're leading, or how they're working, what is it about my leadership that allows them to unlock something in them that they can grow as a human and grow my business in the process? I think it turns it back on me as a leader versus turning it on, how do I make them better? It's, what do I need to change to unlock in me, or what do I need to change in me that unlocks something in them? That is incredibly powerful. And again, I feel like I'm going to spend like a week on each of these, which is what you do with people, right? When you go in and coach, this is not like you ask all of these questions in one session. No. And you have a lot more guiding questions that really launch conversation about leadership and about teams. And when you go in and coach, I know you're not asking the exact same questions in the exact same order every time. You're kind of analyzing what people are struggling with, or where their biggest blocks are, and bringing these to the table. And I just am so grateful for the work you're doing, and for your willingness to come and share this with the people listening, but also myself. I mean, when you asked me, again, when we were on the phone the other day and you just asked the question, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm thinking about this totally different. I need to and it just unlocked in me something really powerful. So I am so grateful that you've taken all the wisdom that you've learned over the years, and that you got in Apple, and you got at StoryBrand, and you got in working with all of your clients, and you've really kind of formed this new approach to how to work with leaders and help their teams get better by really asking these questions, and then doing coaching on how to take practical steps in order to move forward in each of these areas. And I love practical steps. So I'm so just honored that you would come on here. Love seeing your face every time we get to talk. And I will say you did not F it up. So thank you for that. I know.
Big relief.
And for everybody listening, it literally was like it was Amy's very first workshop. I could tell she was a little bit tense, and I knew she was going to kill it. And so I needed to break that ice in her. And so I walked up to her right before she's about to go on stage to talk in front of a bunch of people for this really big client. And I just said, don't F it up. But I said the real word. and she started laughing, and obviously got up and killed it. And then that has been kind of our joke. She has come back to me, like when I've spoken in front of thousands of people, I'm about to walk on stage, and she will walk up and whisper that in my ear just so I get grounded a little bit. So thank you for being here. You did not, you killed it, knocked out of the park. Before we let you go, where can people find you if they're interested in learning more about this, or just talking to you about coming in and speaking to their team or coaching their team? Where can people find you?
I'll give you my email, and then I'll tell you also my website. My email is amy@hanuleadership.com, and that is spelled HONU, leadership.com. So it's a little sort of nod to Hanu is Hawaiian for the sea turtle, which is wisdom, guidance, and leadership. So it's my little nod there. But you can also find me at hanuleadership.com. So, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Amy Smith. Because there's only going to be like one or two of us there. So good luck with that.
Yeah, just nobody else is named Amy Smith on LinkedIn. So
no.
I love it. Well, Amy, I adore you, and I am so grateful for, again, not only you coming on here, but just the leadership that you have brought into my own life, and guiding me and helping me become a better leader by working on my team, and then, working alongside me. And then even like there were times I was even like reporting to you in this process, and which we always kind of joked about. But that like I have experienced you at every level of an organization. And every time you lead, no matter where you are, and my life is better because of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And I hope people reach out and take advantage of your wisdom and your guidance and all this. Every conversation I have with Amy changes me. And I know that you got so much value out of that. I kept talking about in the interview a question that Amy asked me that really sparked all of this. Like we were on a phone call and she asked me a question. And the question was the very first question we brought up in this podcast, which was, when things really matter, can people count on you? She asked me that question. And it kind of shook me in some really powerful ways, not because I thought, I'm really unreliable or anything, but really it was a new way of thinking about leadership. And then she ended up asking me a bunch of others, but that was the question that really sparked something in me and thought, I want to have this conversation on mic so other people can hear it and maybe begin asking that question of themselves. So if you're the kind of person, which I know you are, that is looking to raise your leadership and create an incredible team around you, the thing that I will leave you with today is this. Ask yourself that question. When things really matter, am I somebody that people can count on? And if that's true, then what are some things you can continue to do? And if you feel like maybe that's not true in all these different areas, then what are the things you need to do in order to become that kind of person? It's built over time. Amy said that it wasn't something that happened in an instant. You didn't build or break that trust in an instant. You're not going to build or break that trust moving forward in an instant. But it's going to take small things of being reliable, of being safe, of being trustworthy, so that people can count on you when push comes to shove. I really think that's what being a badass softie is you're strong, but you're safe, right? You're the kind of person when things get hard, you're the leader that people look to move them forward. So let me leave you with this. May you be the kind of leader who, when push comes to shove, people know they can count on you because you're reliable and safe. May you lead with curiosity instead of judgment, listening longer, wondering more, and letting understanding come before opinion. May you be willing to ask yourself the hard questions, the ones that shape your character and sharpen your vision. And may all of this allow you to lead with clarity, humility, and courage, leaving a legacy of trust and transformation in your wake. Because we believe that you can be both ambitious and kind, fun and driven, powerful and deeply human. Your leadership can inspire, your success can have soul, and your ambition can make space for everyone. That's why you're a badass softie. We'll see you next week. Thanks for listening. Follow and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. BadassSoftie.com is crafted by Fruitful Design and Strategy.